Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to one of the Empire City Wire's interview segments. This episode dives deep into the high-stakes world of global finance, from the latest fluctuations in treasury yields to the sectors currently defying the broader market trends. We're breaking down what's actually going on. Whether you're managing a personal portfolio, an account on a personal finance app, or are a finance professional in the industry, this episode will provide you the insights you need to stay ahead of the curve. I'm Jack Halebian. I'm a contributor at the Empire City Wire, and I'll be your host today. To help us cut through the noise surrounding financial markets, I'm joined by someone who spends every day navigating these exact waters for investors and high net worth clients. He's a partner and a wealth manager at Kingsview Asset Management, a frequent face on Fox Business, and one of the sharpest minds in the game. Joining us, please welcome Mario Veneroso. Mario, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Well, thanks for having me, first and foremost, Jackson. Pleasure to be here. I'm Mario Veneroso. I'm a wealth manager, financial advisor, portfolio manager, and I've been doing this, we're getting closer to 20 years now, and every day we learn something different, right?
Totally. Awesome. All right, taking it from the top, what's your favorite part about being a financial advisor, and what's your least favorite part?
Ooh, all right. So my favorite part, very simple. It would have to be working with my clients. I love my clients. My clients are like the air I breathe. Without them, I have no existence. And I believe it was Warren Buffett that said this, if you look at the wealth of a man, the true wealth of any man lies in the value of his relationships.
Totally.
So to me, it's definitely my client relationships first and foremost. I get so much joy, gratification, pleasure, just watching them succeed, go through different phases of life, helping them with their portfolios, helping them retire, helping them reach their goals. So I would say my favorite part of the business is the relationships within my business.
That's awesome.
And the least favorite part, a very small minority, I know as a parent you love all your children equally, right? But I would say, I'm very blessed in life. 95% of my clients, they're molded, they understand the game, they trust me implicitly, and I worked very hard to develop that trust over the years. But I would say there's, a handful where some of them are unrealistic. Yeah. They want all the return with no risk, and it's like,
totally.
hey, that's not how the markets are designed.
Right.
So,
right.
But
Patience. Right.
Yeah, patience. Compound interest and patience. Yeah. If you're patient, you can make a lot of money in these markets.
Yeah, totally. So, what does your day-to-day look like? What kind of work streams or projects would you say take up most of your time? What do you like spending the most time on?
So every day is different, and I know it's cliche, but it is. But there's certain things that are universal, no matter where I am. See, I have clients all over the U.S. I got clients here in New York. I got clients in
Different
Cali.
Different time zones,
yeah. Texas. So, Mario Veneroso is 24/7. You do the bat signal, and Mario appears. So, but I would say a normal day would be, obviously, the first thing I do every single morning is I check the futures. I see if there's any news headlines the night before.
Pre-market futures.
Yeah, the pre-market futures, which is an indicator of how the market's going to open. So if you're going to be great in this business, you got to eat and sleep and breathe this business.
How early are you up?
Oh, my God. So those who really know me know that I don't sleep, I'm 4 or 5 hours maybe.
Wow.
So, I'm up before the birds a lot of days.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of it would be it would be fundamental through a couple things. Number one, seeing how the market opens, looking at my trade blotter, looking what trades I have to put in, looking at the news reports of any of my positions within my portfolios, meeting with having analyst calls, meeting with portfolio managers, financial planning, and then the other half of that aspect, because it's a lot of cerebral work, is actually client service, speaking to my clients, meeting with my clients, having reviews with my clients. So I would say it's half and half. Half of it is portfolio management, and the other half would be, in some regard, client service.
Gotcha. Interesting stuff. So you have to deal with a fire drill at work. What does it look like, and what are your go-to strategies for coming up with a solution to a high-stakes
This is nice drill? Coffee, by the way, right here.
Empire City Wire.
Yeah, there you go. Right, I like that. Look at this plug. I would say business is synonymous with problems, right? You could be preemptive, you could be the best business owner in the world, but every single business on God's green earth, there's a challenge, there's a problem. So it's just part of business. And, dealing with problems, I would say a couple things. The first and foremost is efficiency. If there is a problem, you fix it right away. If there's a fire drill, guess what? You don't let that building burn. You contain that fire and you address it right away. So if there is a mistake, an error, something didn't get processed, something was overlooked, those behind me on my team know, I call it C. It's speed, efficiency, expertise. You have to be quick. There's a reason why in the NFL, the best football players are the fastest ones. You need speed in this world, especially if you're going to have scalability, right? McDonald's, you look at the evolution on how they make hamburgers or cheeseburgers. The old days, before they came up, it took 20 minutes to make a burger. Now they make it in less than 30 seconds, right? So you need speed. But the second thing, just as important as addressing and fixing the problem, is accountability with the problem. So if it was ever a mistake on the front end with the client or anything, honesty is the only thing that you can speak. And you say, hey, I made a mistake. We're fixing it right away. And 99% of the time, it's just exactly the question.
It's just the nature of the business. Yeah.
It's a fire drill, and it's not big. But the few times where it is, you address it, you handle it, and you move on.
And some things are just totally out of control, A spark or something happens, and that's just the way the market works.
I'm 40 years old. I've been doing this for a while now, and to this day, nothing surprises me. It's just adaptability. Something's outside your control. You just got to handle it, and accountability too.
Yeah, totally. So what are your favorite companies? And forget their stocks or stock price performance. I mean, which companies will always be in your portfolios because they are tried and true investments or they sell the products you love?
It's a really good question, but I have to be a little biased. So I'm a portfolio manager. I'm a wealth manager. My number one priority is making clients, having their dollar turn into $2. So I'm going to be biased to the companies that make them the most money, because when clients make the most money, they're happy. Happy clients is a happy business. So, and a lot of companies I like are based on innovation, right? You want a company for the betterment of society. So one company which, I know you love and know and your family loves is Apple, right?
Yeah, totally.
Literally changed the consumer electronics industry, changed the way we looked at phones, not even iPhones. There was no such thing as iPhones 25 years ago. People had beepers, right? So I would say Apple would be one. Amazon, the way they evolutionized e-commerce, almost a third or 35% of purchases go through Amazon. And then they also evolved to having multiple modes within their business. So also they have cloud computing. Another one is Google, right? I like companies that have big ecosystems.
Yeah, totally. Big moats.
Big moats, yeah. I don't want a one-trick pony, because nowadays with anything in life, you have to be adaptable, and you can't just be a one-trick pony. You want to be successful in the world of investing. You want a company that's going to be better than its competitors and have multiple sources of revenue.
Totally.
So Google's another great example. If you do the numbers with Google, there's more users than people in this world, right? They got 4 billion Android users, 2 billion people go on YouTube. Now, obviously, people have multiple accounts, but my point is it's a very large ecosystem, very similar to Apple. You got iPhones, you got services, you got Macs. So I like companies that are, number one, are innovative, and number two, obviously, for the betterment of society. And then the third thing, and this is going back to me being biased, I want companies that make money, that grow above the market, that have strong earnings, strong bottom line, because typically, and just with anything in life, there's no one formula, one secret ingredient. It's not like my grandma's pasta sauce where it's the same ingredients every time.
Right.
But typically, universally, if you have strong earnings, strong revenue growth, innovative products, those companies tend to do well in time with the stock market. And again, it goes back to, if the companies do well, then clients are happy. If clients are happy, Cousin Mario's happy.
Yeah, and a lot of those like one-trick pony companies too. It's like you look at like the Blackberries, like my dad, every single one of my dad's clients, they all had Blackberries. It was like the best phone in the world, you know, and people thought, when Apple got rid of the keyboard, they were like, "Oh, that's never gonna happen," And when's the last time you've ever seen anyone with a
for
BlackBerry?
the younger generation, Blackberries were the phone.
They were the hottest thing ever.
They were like the dinosaurs, but where did they go? So, but yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah. And, innovation, if you're a one-trick pony, you're antiquated and you'll die off like the dinosaurs.
Yeah, totally. So on the other hand, what are some companies you dislike or hate? What are some of your worst investments you've ever made?
It's a good question because it's a humbling question, and I'm far from perfect, right? So there's times where all the fundamentals lined up, and there's an old quote on Wall Street: the markets can be irrational a lot longer than you can be insolvent. So you could be like, I did all my homework, I did all my research, the fundamentals are good, the technicals are good, and sure enough, the stock is bad, right? So there, there's been a couple bumps and bruises along the way, but my job is to mitigate those. And at the end of the day, if there's a small loss, you move on and you reinvest that money into a winner. It's part of the process. It's proactive management. But I would say, man, losers along the way. I could tell you what I don't like as a professional money manager. I don't like stocks that go up and there's no rhyme or reason, whether it's a meme stock or you're like, this makes why did the stock go up 1,000% and they make contact lenses for chickens in South Africa? Like, it just makes no sense. So to me, and it happens, there's been times in the market where it's gotten frothy. So to me, because that's at that point, and I'm very blessed because most of my clients, they live by the sword, they die by the sword. They love cousin Mario here. They trust my word as gospel. But sometimes it'd be like, hey, I bought this company and I made this amount and it's easy. But the market has a really truthful way of humbling you over time. So you need to have a good process.
That's true. That is true. That's very true. Yeah. So what are some scams or frauds out there that investors should keep an eye out for?
Oh, so, I know my dad is not going to listen to this podcast, but I'm going to use my dad as an example. So my last name's Veneroso. I'm 6'1", blonde hair, blue eyes. I don't ask my mom any questions. My dad is an immigrant, literally, from the boat, from Italy. And he's one of those people, if he gets a phone call and they say, hey, there's something wrong with your computer, can we look at it? He'll literally be on the phone with some guy in India, trying to hack into his computer. So I would say the biggest scams to watch out for is any type of phishing, any type of trying to get your information, your credit card, your financials, and it's very prevalent in the industry. The one thing I've learned with doing this is when you go through the different phases of life and the courses of life, there's a reason why the elderly are vulnerable. They're not up to date with computers. They think it's normal. They're maybe more trustworthy. Yeah. And, a lot of scams, unfortunately, prey on the old widow who's 85 years old and worried about her grandson. And if she doesn't transfer this money, you're the county police in Aruba.
Yeah.
So I would say anything trying to get money, information, phishing, block those calls or, write down information, do your due diligence, tell them you call them back. But 90% of the time, they're scams.
Yeah. Yeah, information, some people say information now, data is even more valuable than money.
Yeah.
Because what you do, what signals that information gives to you allows you to be ahead of the market and be ahead of where the value of stocks or currency goes.
Information is the most valuable commodity on Wall Street. So it's very true.
Totally. All right. So moving into current events, how do you think the war with Iran and it's like, I feel like every day there's a new headline coming out about whether the strait is open or closed or open or closed. So how do you think that whole situation...
You got a coin? You want to flip it today?
So how do you think that and higher oil prices are going to impact markets, I guess, in the short term and in the long term?
So, the whole importance of this war is the Strait of Hormuz, right? It's 20% of the world's oil goes through that strait. Now, we're basically energy independent, which is great for us, but it affects everyone. It affects supply chains. It affects the cost of goods. We're starting to see inflation tick up a little bit. So it's impactful. Oil went from before the war, I don't have the chart in front of me, about $75 and went up to $115. Now it's around $95 a barrel crude oil. So it's come down, but it needs to go down further. Because when you have high oil, you have a lot, and we live in a debt-ridden society where, a lot of
small fluctuations like that can cascade across
100%. And I think if you're a young family, you have a few children, and you watch every single penny because every penny matters. All of a sudden, the gas goes from $3 to $4. It costs more money at the pump, costs more money for your groceries. It costs more money for heating your house over the winter. It starts to become like a noose around your neck. So it's definitely very impactful. But ultimately, so short term, we've seen it in the reports. We're going to get PCE next week, where essentially we're starting to see inflation go the other way. Now they're blaming it on the war, short term. So I do think eventually it will subside. But, the quicker we have a resolution, the quicker we can be back onto the road to recovery. Do I see oil going to $75 a barrel? That might be a little bit of a stretch. I hope it does. But, ultimately, if we were at 95, it goes down to 80, 85. I think it's okay. It's not wonderful, but it's enough where we can keep moving forward as a society, as in the stock market as well. And long term, I hope, they say history often doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it often rhymes. I hope, with whatever solution they have over there, whatever new regime, they can start develop ways outside of the strait where they can have maybe pipelines, for example. And then that way, it's not so dependent on whatever regime is over there, whether they're pro-America, anti-America. But, it's yet to be determined.
Yeah. It's tough stuff. So we sort of touched on this a little bit. Inflation and the cost of living has increased substantially over the last year. How can Americans, New Yorkers, and investors insulate themselves from rising costs?
So, inflation's ticked up. But, if you look at the reports, what components of the inflation reports have ticked up? So, number one, shelter, right? It costs more money to live. We're in New York, prime real estate here. You can you can rent an apartment here. Meanwhile, in 49 other states, you can own a house for the money you're paying for an apartment here. So shelter costs have definitely risen. And then the other is service too. So, as we're experiencing higher inflation, it really comes down to two things that can help protect you financially. Number one, cut back some of your discretionary spending. It's either making money or saving money. Those are the only two things you can do to help battle inflation. So I'll talk about the saving part first. Perhaps you don't go to your Starbucks and have $10 coffee. Instead, get this wonderful Empire City Wire coffee.
Brew it for cheap at home.
It's good stuff, guys. And then the second thing is, have investments that will help battle inflation, right? You keep $1 million in the bank 10 years ago, your $1 million is worth $657, right? Like money erodes as inflation goes higher. So you have to take your money, and I always say this, and I know you know this, and your viewers, this is a Mario aphorism here, but you have to pay yourself first, meaning take your money, invest it in things that will hedge against inflation, such as the stock market, commodities, gold, oil. So within my portfolios, I like to have some inflation hedges, as I call it, because if we do experience a time with high inflation, then you have an area of your portfolio that's working for you. But two aspects, to battle against inflation, maybe cut down some of your costs because things are going up. So be smarter with your money, but then more importantly, invest your money and have your money grow.
I've heard, what are your thoughts on like gold or like luxury items? I've heard some people say that like putting your money in like high ticket items can also sometimes
you look at Rolexes, right? They go up, over time. You look at art. Art typically goes up over time. So tangible assets, the value of anything is only what someone's willing to pay for it, right? So, it's a very fickle game, right? Because you could buy something and it was the hottest item yesterday, and then tomorrow it's a non-existent fad. It's gone with the wind.
Totally.
So, but yes, absolutely. There's certain wines, there's certain art, if you're a collector of art, watches, jewelry, but they're all tangible assets. But you're swimming in the right buckets because the wealthy, they want to protect their money. And instead of guessing, if this watch, if a perpetual oyster is better than a Submariner versus a Yachtmaster, I would invest it personally, and I'm going to be biased in the markets because typically the markets are the best inflation hedge.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. This is a pretty broad question, but what do you think the Federal Reserve's next move is going to be? We saw Jay Powell is resigning, right? He's getting replaced. How do we think that's going to unfold?
I actually think it's going to be relatively orderly. And I hope it will be relatively orderly, right? Because if Kevin Warsh doesn't get appointed, then Powell will still sit there for the interim until he is approved. But I think he will. I think there was some political tug and war. I'm just going to be honest, call a spade, right?
Yeah.
Like there was an investigation against him.
Yeah.
And, oh, wait, you're going to step down? Oh, we're going to drop the charges now, right? Like, so I try to be Switzerland, be as neutral as I can when it comes to politics, but I think there's definitely some political underpinnings with the situation.
Definitely, yeah.
But to answer your question, I do think Kevin Warsh is a great candidate. Now, whether he'll be Trump's puppet and does what he says, or they'll have a contentious relationship, or maybe they have a favorable relationship, is yet to be determined. But overall, he's very successful. He literally has the highest net worth of any federal governor, coming on. So he's.
Do you think that's a good or a bad thing?
So it could be two things, right? It could either be he's smart and he's good with money, or you can also take a different view and say, look, maybe he's greedy. Maybe he's part of the inside and he's not going to be with the general public. He's going to be in his self-interest as opposed to the public interest.
Yeah, there's a really funny scene in that show, Succession, where you see Logan Roy, he's in a room with all of his family and everyone. He goes, how much is a bottle of milk? And not a single person in the room can give him a straight answer. So, at a certain point, you could argue you reach a certain net worth where some of those day-to-day items that people really depend on, you really have no.
Yeah, you're distant from reality.
Yeah, you're distant from reality. But to your point, it's yet to be determined. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Maybe it's the internal optimist. I love this quote by Elon Musk. It's, I'd rather be an optimist and be wrong than a pessimist and be right.
Yeah, totally.
So, I hope it will work out. Obviously with the news last week, the DOJ is going to drop the charges. It seems like Jerome Powell is obviously going to resign peacefully, hand off the baton. And hopefully just, the markets don't like uncertainty, right?
Yeah, of course.
Nobody wants this contention, this fighting back and forth. So, we want a good Federal Reserve. We want a Federal Reserve that will look at the data. He's promised he will look at the data. So, hopefully he does. And, he does a good job until otherwise, right?
Yeah, totally. We've seen what a difficult relationship between the government and the Federal Reserve looks like. What would because I obviously the Federal Reserve wants to maintain its independence, but what would you speculate a relationship between the White House and the Federal Reserve would look like if the Federal Reserve just folded into whatever the president wanted to happen?
Oh, man. So that's a more philosophical question, right? Because at the end of the day,
it is philosophical. Yeah, it's a little philosophical.
We're the United States of America, right? And you have to believe in democracy, right? Just like the government has a system of checks and balances, there's the legislative branch, the executive branch, the judicial branch. That was the whole purpose of having an independent Federal Reserve. So, do I think there's merit in having an independent reserve? Absolutely. Right? Because that's the essence of democracy, right?
Totally.
You want a systems of checks and balances. And also, it could be to the betterment of the country because not one person, not one regime, the only thing constant in life is change. I may think something's purple and you think it's fuchsia.
Yeah.
And we have a debate about it, but it's good because at the end of the day, you want a systems of checks and balances. Now, if we fold in, there could be potential problems with that, right? Yeah. You could have a administration that can blow up the deficit, that could cut, to help in the short term. In the long term, obviously be detrimental to the country.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that's going to happen, but
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
saying, there's pros and cons to it. So, I think overall it's not a perfect system, but the system's working. Also, too, it's not just one person. It's not just Jerome Powell. You
Yeah,
look at the
yeah.
data. There's multiple governors on the board. So, to me, I believe independence is key. But if it was another way, it could be. What will happen? It could be high octane. It could either be really good or really bad, right? And is that a risk we're willing to take, right? Because just with anything in life, there were some great kings that ruled, and every kingdom eventually comes to an end. So to me, I think democracy is better, but it's outside my pay grade.
Right, totally. And I agree with you, by the way. This is an interesting one. So we've seen monthly volumes in prediction markets like Kalshi and Polymarket explode this year. As an advisor, do you view these real-time odds on geopolitical events as more reliable than traditional polling or analyst reports?
So, I don't gamble, right?
Right.
I don't like to take bets that I don't win. I don't like to leave anything to chance. I'm a guy that kills something, puts it in reverse, and then kicks it to make sure it's dead, right? So, I know you could bet on anything. You could bet how fast a cockroach will go from one end of the room to the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have all these, new betting sites. Whether they're predictable or not, I personally don't know. I see different reports, and if something's eye-catching, I'll read the report. But, I think the world is a little bit has become a casino, more or less.
Yeah.
I recently read that with the U.S. overtaking Maduro, the Venezuelan president, one of the generals literally took a bet that was going to happen, but he was trading on inside information.
Got, like, indicted or arrested, right, or something.
And I'm like, and that was a far-fetched bet, but he knew something. So, whether every bet is predictable or not, I don't know. I don't follow it. I think with anything, it's probably going to eventually become more streamlined. It'll be like Vegas, right? There's the odds, and then really at the end of the day, in my opinion, the bookies, the bookmakers make all the money. So I don't know, but it's definitely it's eye catching what you could bet on, right? So
there was a really funny cartoon that I saw recently that it showed the White House press room, and all the people in the press were going like, "What's taking so long? What's taking so long?" And they pull behind the curtain. And it's all of the administration officials going, "We're placing our trades."
Oh, that's funny.
Before making an announcement.
So, yeah, you could bet on anything. Yeah. It's good, but that's the world we live in right now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So, what are your opinions on AI and how AI will impact the economy? How might it impact the finance industry and wealth management?
I mean,
wealth
AI is here. It's here to stay. It's revolutionizing the world. Just like what the internet did in the 90s, AI is going to do during our time now. So I'm a believer. I'm a proponent of it. I still think we're in the early stages, but it's extremely impactful. Every business, every industry, right? So I'm a wealth manager, but I'm also an attorney. I passed the bar exam, right? Mm-hmm. You can literally go into a chatbot now and have a contract drafted better than a real life attorney within 30 seconds, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
So, the efficiency of AI and the computing behind it is phenomenal. Even in my business, you take this sheet right here, right? I'm just going to take it for an example. Client gives you a statement. Let's say they have, a $5 million account. They have 100 different positions. The old days, I used to have my internals, my juniors, my assistants, input it. Now we upload it into our system.
Yeah, it's autonomous. It's like completely autonomous
completely
nowadays.
done.
Yeah.
You can have that back.
Yeah, thank you.
Not a $5 million statement, but you get what I'm saying.
I wish it was.
Yeah,
Maybe one day.
it is. Being rich at heart is the most important thing. But anyways, so my point with AI, it's making certain businesses, it's giving them a competitive advantage. And I think, and I can give you countless examples, but I think as time goes on, it's going to be more and more adaptable, and it's basically going to be commoditized. And those who use it will advance from it, and those who don't will be very similar to BlackBerry or like the dinosaurs. They'll eventually become extinct and be left in the dust. So, and I think it's going to help our economy. And eventually, too, I want to say something, and this is just my opinion. Eventually, AI is going to start to become disinflationary. right? Instead of hiring somebody or spending money on this, you could spend money on a chatbot, on a coding system for a third of the cost, and be more efficient within your business. And we're starting to see that through certain sectors and elements of business. But I just think with anything, we're maybe in the third stage of this, third inning. So we got plenty of runway, and I think it's going to help change the world for the better.
Yeah, and I saw something really interesting that Chamath Palihapitiya, I hope I'm not butchering his name, Palihapitiya said about when they rolled out, when refrigeration was invented, the refrigeration companies were not the biggest benefiters from that sort of new technology. It was like the Pepsis or the Cokes,
100%.
So I think when you look at AI, a lot of people forget the end user, and what it's ultimately going to be used for in the long run. So we have yet to see, there could be entire businesses that pop up leveraging AI in
100%.
every aspect of the business. You could have AI CEOs running an entire company of AI employees.
You look at Tesla, you look at all their humanoids, maybe I get replaced by one of them, but hopefully everyone still has love for Cousin Mario. But I think, I just know in my business implementing AI, every month it's becoming more and more useful, more and more prevalent. And I just think it's a matter of time where, I'm in the finance industry, wealth management, but I think it's a matter of time, who knows, maybe I'm thinking of a crazy example here, but like a janitor, for example, they take a floor plan of an architect and they say, hey, you got to start cleaning from here to over there because it's going to be 20 minutes faster. Like nobody knows all the practical applications that AI can do. And it just will be a matter of time before it's just going to be more and more impactful with us. Yeah,
totally agree. What are your opinions on cryptocurrencies? Is there a potential future where they may replace the dollar? There's a lot of uncertainty around the value of the dollar with everything going on. Like, do you see a reality where cryptocurrency could replace the petrodollar?
I think cryptocurrency, it's interesting and it makes sense. Up until 2 years ago, I couldn't even buy cryptocurrency for clients. Now, all of a sudden, we could buy ETFs that will trade directly with the price of Bitcoin or Litecoin, whatever cryptocurrency you want, right? So, just with anything, I think, there's a special, at least from an investment standpoint, I'm a believer of cryptocurrency, but it's not for everybody. Very volatile. If you're 70, 80 years old, you want a safer portfolio. You don't want a volatile portfolio. So, but the actual technology behind cryptocurrency, I think that's interesting because, you could take a blockchain, right? I go down to the stock exchange, I'll do an interview and, you see these terminals and you're like, wow, I'm on the stock exchange. This is 70% of our trading volume goes through this, right?
Right.
I think with cryptocurrency, some of the blockchain technology and having a decentralized system, that could be useful, and it could be useful for finance. Having it replace the dollar is interesting, but I would say another possibility could, instead of replacing the dollar, we could have a cryptocurrency that is the dollar of the American, meaning the American government can go in and essentially create their own crypto wallet. So I think both things could happen. Will it? That's another thing. Let the odds makers or the betting guys predict that. But just with time, I think maybe at a slower pace than AI, but because I think there's a lot of impactful applications with AI. I think cryptocurrency, like you could literally go in a store, you're in Europe, you're here, you can literally pay with cryptocurrency now. So, I think there's value in that too, and it could adapt.
Yeah, it's interesting because the dollar has been tied to multiple things over the course of its history. It's been tied to gold. It's been tied to oil. So who knows? We could.
And also too, with anything within the government, we're still A-rated paper. In 20, 30, 40, who knows what happens? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's nice to have a backup system too.
Yeah, totally.
And I think for a lot of believers in crypto, they think it's the main system. Whether it's the main, primary or secondary is yet to be determined, but it's nice to have options, right? And if our country's going the wrong way and we don't have a lot of faith in the dollar, and other countries don't have a lot of faith in the dollar. Why do you think gold is going up, right, so much? Gold is kind of the alternative to the dollar. And in a sense, you could also say Bitcoin is like the cousin of gold, right? It's another different type of asset that, if we get weaker, perhaps more institutions will go into cryptocurrency because it is decentralized.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't even thought about that. And then you got to think about the correlations between stock prices and crypto as opposed to the correlations between stock prices and the dollar.
Yeah. There's a lot of consideration.
Because I mean, if all the consumers are using crypto, how could that impact markets and the value?
And then also too with crypto, you take tariffs, you take other outside forces that could affect the dollar. Mm-hmm. With this, I don't want to say it's more honest, but perhaps there's less variables with it.
Yeah.
Or maybe more.
It's more stable.
Yeah, like you could say, hey, if we have a very strong dollar, maybe countries don't invest as much in us because they can't purchase as much.
It's an international currency.
Yeah.
So Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, says he reads 5 newspapers a day.
Love
the
that.
Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the New York Post, the Washington Post, and the Financial Times. So what do you read, and where do you get your news?
Oh, man, I read incessantly, right? So I always say I'm a student of life and the markets. Maybe it's because I've had a lot of schooling in my life, right? Whether it's undergrad, whether it's law school. But I always say a self-education is more valuable than a formal education. To this day, I read. Before coming here, I was reading Barron's and IBD, right?
Yeah.
So I read every weekend. I read Barron's, I read IBD. Wall Street Journal is a great publication as well. And then I also, within my trading system, I get certain
you get your feed.
So I'm always reading. But I think to be, on top of your game, I don't care what any business, and I would say this all, to any graduate coming out of college. I call it KCC. Knowledge plus confidence will lead you to closing. And whatever business you're in, you need revenue. So you have to close. But in order to close, you have to have the knowledge. You have to be a subject matter expert. You got to know more than anybody in that room. Whatever product you're selling or whatever services you're offering, you got to be the expert in that. And the only way you're going to be an expert is by putting in your 10,000 hours.
Yeah, totally.
And I put in many of those, but even to this day, I read every day like it's my last day. And to me, it's made all the difference in the world. And I would tell anyone in any career, know what's going on with your industry, know what sectors are moving. Know at the end of the day more than anyone else will know, and then they'll pay you what anyone, a price that no one else will pay. So. Yeah,
totally. Do you have any preferences surrounding like print versus digital, you can?
So I'm actually like pretty pathetic in life. So those that know me, I'm okay when it comes to tech, but I'm not great. But I actually still like to open up the paper and read it with my cup of coffee. So
I love like getting like a weekend New York Times
and also Times
open.
Post. Yeah. So like I'm old school. Hey, it's just the way it works. But I'm like
you get the images blown up instead of just looking at them on a tiny phone.
And I got terrible eyesight. I've read too much in my life. I'm a -8. I don't want to squint on my phone or tablet. I need that paper. I still mark it up to this day. I'll circle something. And another thing too, there's one thing of reading something, and then there's another thing of absorbing it. Mm-hmm. So another bit of advice, not that you're asking, but I'm going to give, that's been instrumental for me, is you have to absorb the material. And the best way to absorb it is a shortest pen is better than the longest memory. Even to this day, if I read, I take notes, and I literally have, and I carry it with me. It's a 5-subject notebook of Mario's notes. So,
that's really interesting.
And it just works for me. I'm an acquired taste, I've been told.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, that's a great idea, though. I should start journaling more myself.
You see something good, or you see a quote, you see a statistic, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. But then when you write it down, you memorialize it a little bit more. But you already sound smart at cocktail parties anyway, so.
Right. So what are your thoughts about, this is an interesting one. What are your thoughts about private equity firms purchasing single-family homes and the new policies and proposals to legislate around that?
Yeah. So, I think at the end of the day, homes should be for people, for families.
Right.
You know, I always think there's a right and wrong way of earning a dollar. There's an honor in the dollar, but there's a right and wrong way. So if you're buying up half the town so no one else can buy it, and you're controlling the supply and demand to make your balance sheet look better, at the cost of everyone else in that town,
Yeah.
I personally have a moral dilemma or moral problem with that. You take a guy in a fancy suit at a private equity firm, he'll argue against me. He'll say, no, that's, perfectly within the rules and the purview. But, just with anything, right? There's a right and wrong way of making money.
Yeah.
So I think I would be more of a proponent of having legislation around that, preventing these firms, because, you want an open market, right? And if you get these huge institutions basically knocking out the smaller middlemen because they have the big money,
Yeah.
it's just not fair. It's not a fair game. And you need to have an open and free market and fair market, right?
Yeah. Totally.
And so I think having some type of control or regulation around that, it's like I'll make an analogy. It's like competing with a hedge fund, right? You have a portfolio, but if they're placing sell orders to drive down the price of a stock and then rebuying it back, it's manipulating the market.
Yeah, it's like pitching a family against like Goldman Sachs or something to buy a house. It's crazy.
How do you compete against that?
Yeah.
So I think there should, and I like that it seems to be that there's going to be regulation that will help control that and prevent that, because I think it's too much manipulation. And at the end of the day, you want the betterment for the consumer, for the end user, right? So I don't know if these private equity firms, if they're getting rich off of somebody's back. And if it's by buying single-family homes and keeping them and controlling the market and manipulating the price, I don't like that.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that distinction between residential property and commercial property, because obviously commercial property is fair game.
Yeah,
If you want to buy an office building, if you want to build the flashiest, most fancy building, go
reward,
for it,
Absolutely. You reward those conglomerates or those private equity firms that go into those ventures, because at the end of the day, it's exactly what you said. It's a commercial setting versus residential.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you're buying up all these homes and there's a single mom and she can't afford a price and now she's got to pay high rent because of it, I just don't like that. But a commercial, absolutely, it's a different variable within real estate, but it's a variable where you need those corporations to do that. But I think there's a distinction when it comes to residential.
One other interesting thing is, with COVID and with like with COVID lockdowns easing and everything, there's also a push to create a lot more of mixed properties that
mixed use,
like mixed use that incorporates
you have a commercial downstairs,
residential,
and then
maybe cocktail bars too. So I mean, I don't think that's been rolled out greatly, but I think that's also an interesting thing.
Yeah, that's kind of a hybrid. It's between the two.
It's so much of life is hybrid now. You have people going into the office 2 or 3 days a week versus 5 days a week. So building
COVID changed a lot of things.
Yeah. I used to go in 5 days a week pre-COVID. I don't know how I had the time to do laundry or cook dinner. It's crazy.
I know. It's definitely changed things. But look, it's we adapt no matter what.
Yeah, totally. Do you have any projects or anything that you're working on now that you're excited for and want to pitch to everyone?
Stay tuned. Yeah, just with me and my practice, I take a lot of pride, in my name, right? Veneroso Wealth Management here. So I think just with anything, always doing good, business is going great, and we keep busy, so we always have, not tricks under our sleeve, but we always have a lot of projects we work on, and at the end of the day, our results speak for themselves. So, the best is yet to come. As I say, better days are in front of us, and the best days are in front of them. Yeah,
I've got some trivia questions here to make it exciting.
Oh boy, okay.
So the iconic charging bull statue was originally An act of guerrilla art dropped in front of the stock exchange following which major market event? I wouldn't know this myself if someone asked this to me.
I would major market event. I would probably say
it was a contraction. I'll give you that as a hint.
Okay. So the biggest contraction would be the 1929 to 1932 Great Depression, that crash.
One's a little too early.
Then Black Monday.
Yeah, the 1987. Yeah,
okay.
yeah, stock market crash.
I got a little hint there, a little hint. I can't take credit for it. Really, 87? I feel like the bull has just been much more iconic before then. But
yeah. That's the answer I've got here.
Okay, that's interesting.
We'll have to fact check.
No, I believe it. I'm not quite. I believe. I just, it's so iconic. Within the stock. The bull and bear. So.
Yeah, it's hard to think about the financial district without that bull. I can't even.
Yeah, it's inspirational.
When the U.S. Secret Service was founded in 1865, it wasn't to protect the president. What was its primary mission?
That I'm not even going to guess.
To combat widespread currency counterfeiting.
Counterfeiting, okay.
Estimated at the time, a third of all dollars in circulation at the time were counterfeit.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
The service's original mission was to combat counterfeiting, which is interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah. See, I learned something new.
Last trivia question. Which massive gold vault located 80 feet below street level in Manhattan is estimated to hold approximately 25% of the world's monetary gold reserves? Looks like a fort. It's on like Maiden Lane.
Okay.
The Federal Reserve.
Oh, the Federal. Okay, that makes sense.
The vault is built directly into the bedrock of Manhattan Island to support the weight of the gold bars.
I got it. Okay, that makes sense.
They're moved between cages, and they're assigned to different nations. Wow.
It's a lot of gold there.
A lot of gold, yeah.
A lot of gold.
And then last trivia question. Most people don't realize how quickly money moves. What is the average lifespan of a standard $1 bill before it's pulled from circulation? I would have no idea.
Lifespan of a $1, 20 years?
Less.
10?
Under 10. 6.6 years.
That's it. Wow. Yeah.
I guess a dollar changes
Dollar's
hands
worth nothing
more
anymore. Yeah. It's it erodes. Ever since COVID, with higher inflation, it erodes even faster.
Yeah.
So it's shortening the lifespan.
Yeah.
That's interesting, though.
All right. Well, that brings us to our closing here. I've got a short joke written down here. What's the difference between a day trader and a gambler? A gambler at least gets free drinks.
That's funny. I like that one.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for joining us, Mario. And to our audience, stay tuned for future news and interviews. Visit us online at EmpireCityWire.com.
Thanks for having me, bud.
Yeah. So that's a wrap.